To almost everyone, crashing your car is not your idea of fun. The damage to your car, never mind the danger to your body, is seriously something to fear. So how does this get worse? Try crashing your car in a woody area, out of sight of any help in the pouring rain. Sounds like a nightmare now? How about if an unlikely hero came out of the shadows to your rescue? Today we're going to be exploring the story of a dying woman that was rescued by a homeless dog by dragging her over 100 feet 30 meters to get some help. In the quiet suburbs of Pavos, Georgia, lived a woman and her husband. Just like any other married couple, they were quite susceptible to getting into a squabble here and there over a variety of things. However, on one particular rainy night, their squabble escalated from a small argument into one of the worst arguments in the history of their relationship. Shannon, the woman, was not getting through to her husband and felt extremely frustrated. They had been arguing for hours at the top of their voices. Horrible words had been exchanged. Decorations around the house had been thrown at one another. It was an awful situation. Shannon came to the conclusion at about 10 o'clock at night that their fight was going nowhere. Unable to sleep or even sit, Shannon jumped into her car and went for a drive to try and let off some steam. Her husband had pleaded with her not to go because of how dangerous the weather had become, but Shannon just saw red. She knew she wasn't going to be able to calm down unless she got the space that she needed. Initially, she drove a block away and stopped. Pulling the car over, she sat and tried to calm herself down. However, this didn't work. Starting the car up again, she began to drive through the neighborhood in circles, unsure of where to go. Realizing the driving in circles just frustrated her even more, she made the decision to take a longer drive away from home. At this point, she was feeling very emotionally unstable. Her eyes were swollen and teary from the amount of crying she had done, and her throat was hoarse from screaming. Without realizing, Shannon had begun to start speeding. Her car was stable on the road, so she didn't really notice. That was until she took the notorious Black Mountain Peak Road. This particular road is also nicknamed as the NASCAR Road. It is highly distinctive for its winds and curves, in addition to its gravelly texture. Under normal circumstances, this road is quite safe, used by many in the area. It is usually a low-speed zone naturally because of the traffic jams constantly building up. However, under the current weather conditions and time of day, this was not the case. Rain that had poured for hours had begun to flood the road, making aquaplaning much more likely, lifting the gravel from the surface of the road. It was a disaster in the making. Now combine this with an emotionally unstable driver driving on an empty road, and we have a big problem on our hands. When Shannon first drove onto the Black Road, it was like every other time she had done this before. She knew the road like the back of her hand. However, she failed to calculate the danger of her situation based on her current condition. She was zipping along the road and managed to take the first curve successfully. However, she was not so lucky the second time around. Swerving around the second curve, Shannon completely lost control of the car. The back end of the car fishtailed out from behind her, and before she could even realize what was happening, she felt the impact of the crash. The car spun and landed headfirst into some bush on the side of the road. Shannon was repelled backwards, smashing through the rear window. There she lay, half in and out of the car, her waist caught on the back window. Shannon recalls not realizing much of what happened. However, she knew she was in intense pain. Her body ached from the impact, and her head was extremely heavy. Fluttering in between consciousness, Shannon began to realize the dire situation she was in. From where she was positioned, she realized that even if a car drove along the road, she was positioned out of sight. She had to find a way to move into people's view if she was ever going to get any help. Unable to move, she closed her eyes hard and prayed for some kind of help. Feeling a strong presence, she opened her eyes and looked around. Standing above her was a giant dog, panting and sniffing her all over. At first, she was relieved to have some company, but quickly began to fear that the dog was going to leave her behind. As the dog walked away, Shannon remembers thinking to herself that she was doomed. The optimistic side, though, thought maybe the dog was going to find his owner. Only he did something else, something she had never imagined. Shannon distinctly remembers her body being jostled from the body of the car wreck. When she opened her eyes, she was shocked. The dog had locked jaws on the scruff of her jacket and was attempting to pull her out of the car. He laid his front paws against the wreckage of the car and pulled with all his might. Adjusting his grip a few times, the determined dog kept trying to move Shannon. Eventually, he proved successful. Inch by inch, the dog was able to gently pull Shannon from the wreckage, lifting her slowly to the ground. Shannon was relieved. Still flitting in between consciousness, she knew that there was some kind of hope. When Shannon opened her eyes again, she realized that the dog had begun to drag her body along the road. She was astounded to acknowledge that even the dog knew that they had to move in order to get help. Painfully, the dog dragged her unconscious body as far as he could. When they reached a busier section of the road, he knew they were in a better situation. Moaning and nudging Shannon, he managed to get her to regain consciousness. Looking around her, Shannon could hardly believe the dog had been so smart. She became conscious of cars moving past her on the road above and realized that the only way they were going to be seen was if she took some action. Slowly, she began to find the strength to lift herself up. The concerned dog tried to assist in nudging her up, but failed. Falling to the floor, Shannon felt defeated. The dog, however, had not given up. He continued to nudge her and attempt to get her up in some way. So Shannon wrapped her arms around the neck of the dog, and the dog pulled. Her pounding head echoed through her body. Somewhere from deep within, she found the strength to pull her legs underneath her and half stand up with the dog for support. Little did she know how perfect her timing was. Just then, a car passed and stopped quickly after seeing the sight of a bloody woman leaning on a dog. Hailing for help, the local had been on his way home from the airport when he came across the awful sight of Shannon and a German shepherd. It was nothing like he had ever seen before. Calling an ambulance, he managed to get Shannon to a hospital. He put the dog in the back of his car and followed Shannon to the hospital. When Shannon arrived at the hospital, she got the medical assistance she needed. Turns out she had suffered a severe head injury, an intracranial hemorrhage. If she hadn't been found, she would have bled to death in the bush on her own. Her husband was notified and rushed to her side. As if this story wasn't incredible enough, it turned out that her hero that had saved her was, in fact, homeless. He had no home nor owner, but somehow had managed to find the compassion and instinct to help this stranger. Today, Shannon is living a good, healthy life, all thanks to her guardian angel that night. And the dog? He was adopted by a woman named Heidi Droddy. She is part of the South Georgia Search and Rescue. Today, the dog aptly named Hero does what he does best, rescuing people from the surrounding forests. And Shannon gets to live a long, fruitful life with her loving husband. What an incredible story. An unlikely hero who happened to be in the right place at the right time, allowing a woman to have a second chance at life. Perhaps there is such a thing as guardian angels after all. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our page for more incredible stories. Until next time.